Okay, here we go. It's a big one. What is atmosphere, anyway? Well, it's the feeling of the world around you, the combination of the nuances in visuals and sounds that dictate the environment to you. This sort of thing relies on and substantiates immersion, which is extremely important for horror. Now, there tends to be two kinds of horror. I know, how cliché do I sound right now? Honestly, there's loads of kinds, but you can slot any horror movie or game into basically one of these two options. You've got the more violent horror, and then you've got the more psychological horror. I made this comparison in my previous video. For the former, the violent horror, is things like Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hostel, anything that really shocks the audience with visuals that are focused on violence and gore. A shock factor that's boosted by blood and flesh. Then you got your psychological stuff, where the film or game is relying on the viewer's imagination. So this would be things like Poltergeist, Blair Witch Project, and Paranormal Activity. Films that have little to no evidence of actual enemies aside from the freaky shit with no explanation until you reach a sort of horrifying conclusion. It relies on imagination and fear of the unknown. Which is better? Well, like I said in my previous video, anyone with taste will pick the psychological horror because most of the time it sticks with you, relies on your brain doing work, and requires an immense amount of subtle content creation, which is much harder to pull off than fleshy nonsense. What happens when you combine them, though? I mean, that's essentially what Amnesia was trying to pull off. Open with an intense level of rising psychological horror, then actually bring in partially what you were imagining. They drip feed what has happened here and how you ended up here, narrowing your imagination as time goes on. But that is how you tell an honest story. We would all love to remain a writing prompt to say something like, hey, it's a world where we have a park that is constructed of kind of robotic people that are indistinguishable to real people that rich folk can come and pretend to be cowboys with and kill them and screw them, but there's something going on, the robots are becoming sentient. We can't remain that way, you have to actually tell an end to your story, and a vast majority of good stories end up being concluded in the most contrived and nonsensical ways in order to end the story. You can only keep your storyline up in the air for so long before the audience will get restless and demand an ending. I mean, look what happened to Lost. Amnesia was never considered a great story, but it was satisfying. It told us why the creatures were there, it told us who Alexander was and why we wanted to kill him, but most importantly, it told us what Daniel did and why he ended up where he is in the beginning. It's more than applies to SOMA as well, and it's something I really appreciate from Frictional. They tell a very complicated, long story and maintain it throughout. There wasn't a soul who said that SOMA didn't make sense. Well, nobody who actually followed the story anyway. There was some dumpy cunt who said it was terrible, but not that it didn't make sense. Promise only gets you so far. A world filled with creepy monsters isn't enough, and you have to tell a good story to surround it. Or you can bait the shit out of your consumers to tell the story for you and keep changing the story. Regardless, the story may have nailed it, but without the atmosphere, how is everything going to be glued together? How is it made, anyway? Well, you're going to need an ambient theme to really set the tone, then add some of the off-the-wall sounds without any discernible pattern, throw in what seems to be random occurrences that are minor yet appear to have something behind them, then give the surrounding world a sense of abandonment and dark tones. Finally add some mood lighting that feels as though it's actively being banished by the world around you, and there you go. You have Amnesia's atmosphere. The entire purpose of it is to foster the overall scare result. You could just be thrown into a game and told that there's a spook source, and then you just go, but that's no fun. It's something that a lot of copycat games are starting to pick up on. I mean, once everyone does a thing, it becomes par for the course, but how well you do it is still important. Pacing is a huge issue that I'll get into again, but you don't blow your load until the end, is the most layman way of saying it. I say that knowing the success of a game that blows its load continuously and infinitely, but having a taste in horror is important, guys. Trying to avoid conflating the money-making horror with the well-constructed horror is important. Anyway, in these games, an added bonus is that you can't rely on your vision. Your vision is a resource in Amnesia and SOMA. It diffuses your perception based on a myriad of influences. Ultimately, people describe the feeling of playing Amnesia and SOMA as terror, or horror, and fear versus existential dread. Why is this? Is the atmosphere a factor? I would say so, yes. So in both these games, there's an idea of the player creating the horror for themselves. This is so very fucking true. The games rely on you engrossing yourself and maintaining the world around you. This is why people like Joseph Anderson can't connect with the material. He's one of the people he describes as,
there will be people who go into horror games with a specific intent to not be scared, because they want to prove to themselves or the world that they aren't creeped out, or are so rational or brave that the silly game and its silly scares don't work on them. Or, far more favorably, they simply don't enjoy being scared, and separate themselves so much that they don't engage with the game on that level and play it for the story or something instead.
I honestly love that he includes that bit. he has absolutely no self-awareness. Regardless, these people will never connect with Frictional's games. It's no fault of their own, they aren't wrong for feeling how they do, but when they try and ascribe the reason to Frictional failing as a company to produce an incredible and unique gaming experience, well, then I have a problem with them. So like I said, the player scares themselves.
The key into scaring the player is to allowing him to scare himself, because you can't really scare the player with something really concrete. I mean, you can never come up with a monster unless the player is scared of spiders or something that really terrify him. Instead, you have to be subtle about it and make him believe that there's something that he's really, really afraid of, and that thing is going to happen to him anytime soon. That's when you can induce real fear into the player, and also immerse him in the game world. And she should have the feeling of being insecure and not really sure about what's going to happen next. That's the really best thing, I think.
And what we want to do is, when you put the controller down, make it so that when you walk away, you still have these really weird questions in your head. Yeah. So we just want to cause you to think, and we want the real horror, the deep horror, to come from what's in your head.
A major design guideline for us was to give each level a unique theme, something that all puzzles, events, and the general atmosphere was built upon. This makes each level a little piece of the story and theme at large, and also gives them focus so the player is not distracted with too much information. The theme in this level is the strange creatures that lurk in the castle. The player first spots them momentarily in archives, so now is the perfect place to build some fear. There is never any real threats in this level, but it's much darker than any before, and there's a constant pressure with boards creaking and the like. The flashbacks also give hints of where the strange creatures come from, making all events focused on the level's central theme.
A horror game that's psychologically scary, not just boo scares, but rather we want to have this nasty feeling, a feeling of dread for the player. And that's really something that we have tried to focus on, using sound and music in the right way.
Frictional rely on players with a sense of imagination and willingness to go into the unknown with an open heart. I will be honest and say that I looked at games before Amnesia as sort of silly in that respect. Their attempts to scare me, but I moved through the narrow halls and absorbed every last detail as I would if I were there in real life, and I began to feel uneasy and unsafe. By the time the monsters were actually showing up, I was already catatonic. It would be a prudent argument to say that this is my perspective, and that my experience is a reason that you should play these games, or that's why they're so good. My goal is to find out why all of this happened in the first place, to dig up every last piece of information I can find that's important to this dissection and lay it out all for you. If my own experience can help fill in some blanks, then so be it, but my experience was a result of incredibly meticulous design, and if that hasn't been proven in the last few hours of video, perhaps the rest will. Frictional had something that they champion called sensory deprivation. This essentially means that the expected senses we get in video games are torn away from us. Be it basic vision or basic sound, they go from being an easy telltale source of information like they would be for hearing footsteps in a shooter or seeing the platforms in a 2D platformer, to something that we have to take very seriously and nurture. In Amnesia, your vision is almost a resource, and you can barely trust what your ears are telling you because you can't tell the difference between ambience and actual danger. This is the assault that Thomas Grip talks about, the absolute obliteration of the things that you hold dear about exploration and absorption in a video game. All of this, alongside everything I've talked about in that slow drip environment.
The name of this level is Rainy Hall, and it's supposed to be a combination of atmosphere setter and tutorial for the player. We wanted the player to start the game in a slow way so they could settle in and get used to how the game works. Amnesia is not a game with constant action happening all the time, and we wanted to have a constrained map where the player gets used to this. The only thing you need to do is to follow the track and get to the end of the level. Also, following tracks is something that becomes very useful in later levels, so we try to teach players this from the start.
Alright, so as I said, don't blow your fucking load. This is a design philosophy held by Thomas Grip to the point of recommending the potential of not showing the enemy whatsoever. The enemy is what you make of it, ultimately. There is a film called Insidious, I'm sure you've all heard of it. I watched this shit for the first time on my own, and I ended up rewatching it with a friend to test a theory. The enemy in that film is presented at first as a black figure standing over the child in question, and I was honestly creeped the fuck out. But then he's revealed to be this goofy old man with Darth Maul face paint on, and I honestly was so deflated by it. Remember that movie I was talking about before, Darkness Falls? The payoff in that movie of finally removing the mask she's worn all the film is that decaying old rancid face. That not only looks creepy as fuck, but it adds a dimension of why she was wearing the mask in the first place. I mean, there are narrative reasons for her wearing the mask, but it's besides the point. Don't blow your damn load. But if you do, do it well. Please. I mean, Frictional still blow their load eventually in Amnesia, and it was the encounters that really could make or break the experience. If you glitched one of the servants, then the fear drained incredibly fast. But if you saw them for a split second, and died as a result to only be reset in a world where they still exist, that's terrifying. Another angle you have to consider, like Frictional noted in their blog, was that they also depend on what kind of person the main character is. The enemy will usually be an amped up version of the primary character. So if you have a gruff, experienced soldier, then your main monster will be advanced warriors from outer space. If your guy is someone who isn't retarded, but will maintain some form of defense, then give your enemies immunity to certain weapons. However, if your guy is defenseless, then you don't really need to go much further than a wailing psycho. A brute, if you will. Even the most basic of a threat becomes terrifying in the right environment. I mean, hell, they can be assessed as non-threats and still be scary as fuck.
Oh, your legs are basically bone. Oh, that's gross. How can this thing even hurt me? Nah, it doesn't matter, I'm still running away from it.
It's that minimalist approach, using little of your enemy, allowing the atmosphere to soak into the player and watch them be terrified of nothing.
2501? What was that?
The mere sound of dripping in the right atmosphere can send people insane with fear from their own imagination. They're expecting there to be horrific elements, so even the most mundane or stative elements can become threatening.
I'm gonna call it the whoa from now on, just because it's a little more amazing. What was that? What is that? Why is that? I didn't mean to do that! Oh! Oh! Okay. I thought that was a thing. That really sounded like it was a thing.
Shit! Oh my god. What the fuck? Oh, I don't even want to look behind us right now. Catherine, if you were setting me up right now, this is not the right time.
This is the great achievement for Frictional Games. They combine massive amounts of every available element to really drive the fear home. They build the atmosphere like masters with just hints of the whole scenario getting worse and worse.
Whoa! Whoa, what is that? Did you see that shit? Oh, okay.
So to bring it back, don't oversell, and then your real scares will hit like a fucking metric ton in terms of horror.
Yep. Ha ha! I'm the man! I'm the man with the plan. What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh my god!
Frictional were always massively concerned with how the player interaction matches the environment and the atmosphere, i.e. don't create a spooky, dank, terrifying world then give the player a minigun with infinite ammo. These things are almost antithetical to each other. Not that it wouldn't be fun, it just wouldn't tap into the primary levels of fear we all have, encased in amber at this point. This includes involving certain in-game reward systems that can also be counter to the overall experience. Thomas Grip was critical of Dead Space Extraction because during gameplay on a rail cutscene style moment, the player was given opportunities to shoot bonus boxes to get extra resources, and ultimately scenes that were originally intended to foster fear were now being used to create a target practice game, which simply didn't blend. This is why game genres exist. There are certain types of gameplay, atmosphere, characters, and world design associated with particular genres. In Amnesia, when you complete something or do something right, a reward is provided to the player in the form of light or a breath of fresh air. Things that you desperately want in this world. It maintains that oh-so-special thing we call atmosphere. Imagine collecting intel in Call of Duty and your character goes, it wouldn't make sense. In the blog, Thomas went on to say that movies have been keeping video games from evolving past them because the goal of making a game cinematic has only crushed creativity and led to some very disappointing titles. Films are films, books are books, games are games. It's annoying that games were considered a second-class medium for so long, but it was that time that it was free to breathe. Now it's trying to reach all audiences, and no one in the mainstream wants to play a complex, satisfying RPG that can explore the self through themes and intrigue. No, we want to see how many things we can kill with a super awesome VAT system in 3 dimensions. Regardless, he thinks that there is untapped potential in games because you're ultimately in a living, breathing world that is at your hand as opposed to someone else's camera view. What have we learned so far? It is immersion. Immersion is the key to success in any horror game. It's the foundation, it's the linchpin, it's not whatever this faggot said.
Item management is the cornerstone of any good horror game, and it's completely absent here, and it's just disappointing.
Fucking item management. Go home, mate. How many items were in fucking Outlast or PT or Until Dawn? Foundation? I think not. The majority of them, the focus was on the atmosphere, interestingly enough, an idea popularized with the success of Amnesia. But the lack of experience in game reviewers will be something I can hop on at the end. So before I jump into the individual games, breaking immersion would be absolutely Harambe. As Thomas commented on once again in his blog, there is a huge focus on the player being the character in Amnesia, and things were put in place to stop the character from getting in the way of that. During development with Penumbra, they experimented with the character saying things out loud in terms of feelings and perspectives. The point of this was to try and get people to resonate more so with the character, to agree with what he was saying, and if they didn't, they could pass it off as his creeping insanity. This wasn't nearly as successful as ditching the character speech altogether. As we know from SOMA, they brought it back in full force, but this was to assist the overall philosophy, which we shall cover. But breaking immersion, an absolute fucking no-no.
And this is also why, if you were to bump into, say, an invisible wall here, which we all love, where the game says, oh, you can't go anymore, you bump into it there, then that sucks. What a crappy game, because it violated what your mental model was of the game. So it's vital to making sure that the player's mental model is correct as much as possible.
Amnesia is more reliant on the unknown than SOMA is. It's made clear by the fact that most don't even know where the monsters come from or what anything outside of Brennenburg even was. It's not too imperative, but it's a sense of just wanting out of the environment.
Whoa, oh, what the Christ. Okay, I don't want to know what's down there. That can just go away. That can go to hell. Literally.
The vibe is set from the get-go, and the game makes sure to tell you to maintain low light and high volume to help entice you into the atmosphere, because we all do secretly want to see how we'd fare in this sort of challenge. And then we immediately regret it.
So I'm going to recommend that you set the vibe with me, which is lights off, headphones on, volume up. And I would also recommend watching this at night. I am going to challenge myself to only play this at night. And I don't know. Maybe this is a bad idea. The music's already getting to me.
The opening development of the atmosphere can send players nuts, and it just wants you to stay on that horrible edge.
I don't want to go there. I do not want to go that way at all. I'm going to have to, aren't I? This is the way out. Shit. There's nothing there. Oh God. It's fucking behind me. Oh. Quit with the fucking piano! God damn it, there's nothing there! Oh. Stupid game!
As you can see, the sounds are integral to the experience. Check out the info on how they made the sound of the brute.
When I was looking at the concept art of Brute Monster, I thought that it should sound like one long tone, which is coming from the tube. Because it doesn't have mouth, it should sound like hollow thing, which can't make clear and complex vocalization. Firstly, I recorded lots of different kind of dogs and I edited them to play as one tone. I had lots of discussion with Jens and I think I got the right idea, but there was feeling that it was coming too close and it wasn't scary and blah blah blah. So it wasn't really scary. It was just big mess. I think I made something like 5 or 6 different versions, but problems didn't go away. Finally, I just removed the dog sounds and used my own voice. I made it with old metal sink, speaking through the tube and putting the microphone in front of the sink. And that way I got more control on the vocalization, and tube kind of sound was natural because it was coming from actual tube. I think Brute's movements were the easiest ones for me. I knew from the beginning how I wanted it to sound. I wanted it to be very metallic, since it has lots of metallic things in its body, and it should be very heavy, scary guy. I was a little bit worried about how the high-pitched screeching would work, but it actually turned out great with the music, because the music is very low frequency and movement is high frequency, so there is nice spectre of sound. Together they make Brute even scarier.
These sounds are played whether or not something's actually there, at different times, at different places. This results in the non-stop bashing of the player's senses, resulting in unbridled fear.
The thing is that we try and keep everything in the player's mind, show as little as possible, and also let the player do as little as possible. Because if you're like shooting stuff all the time, that's your main activity. You're not gonna focus on some weird sound. And so if your entire focus is just focusing on weird sounds, you get a different kind of experience. You're like minimizing the impressions that the player has. Sensory deprivation almost, with just the small sounds and ambient tunes and stuff like that.
So assuming I've made that clear, it should help you guys understand the value of relief, the ups and downs of experience. If you had a non-stop atmosphere in the game as crushing as Amnesia's is, the constant prison levels over and over, it would break everyone's scale and become not only repetitive but frustrating. This is a problem that many custom stories face because certain developers didn't understand the value of relief.
This is the second hub level of the game, and is supposed to give some contrast to the stressful lurker encounter. We think building up contrast like this is extremely important for the horror mood. Only by seeing a bright level can you appreciate the dark one, and so on. If you do not do this, player will get used to the stuff and the effect will lessen greatly. This is another one of those contrast levels, this time calming the player down for what will happen once the elevator is finally running. The map is still dark though, giving a bit of foreboding for what is about to happen.
We need contrast to understand just how dark and horrifying the other levels were in comparison. We always welcome the relief, but we have this feeling of dread associated with returning.
After the prison level, some light is needed, and that is what we want to give the player right now. We also wanted to have an environment that did not look like anything else the player has seen so far. When the player has endured the dark and gloomy dungeon levels, we wanted to give some sort of award for coming so far, and this level is supposed to be that award. The sound of water is also found quite soothing for most people, so we wanted them to relax, calm down. Only to be more acceptable for scares later on, of course.
They even had this sort of design perspective with venturing to the outside. Being able to escape the castle even for a moment meant that we had something to compare to. This was very important in building the world itself.
The decision to have the player go outside in this map started out as a quick and dirty idea for some sort of puzzle. However, it turned out very nicely, and to see the trees really gives a feeling of being in a castle and not just on sunset. The first idea was not even to have the player break the window and just have it open directly instead. But when we added it, we felt it gave a really nice feel and reward for finishing the puzzle. In retrospect, we should have had more moments when the player ventures outside, and it gives this feel of being a part of a larger world.
So all in all, Amnesia fucking kills it. Literally every element I've described throughout this whole thing has been trying to crack exactly what they did and why this game is going to be remembered.
This is the genius of a horror game like this. It does nothing but constantly that wasn't open before, oh dear. Constantly terrify you, but show you nothing. And then you're a bloody emotional wreck by the time you actually get to see something.
It's quite a while before you even glimpse a monster, and let me just transcribe my thought process at the time. Dum-de-dum, well, this isn't very scary. Oh look, physics, I can throw chairs around like a removal man who's completely stopped giving a shit. Doors suddenly blowing open in the wind, yawn-a-rama, guess I'll just look around upstairs and then might as well play Halo Reach for a bit. Nope, nothing much up here either. I'll just go back and... whoa, what was that thing I just glimpsed running down a hallway? I don't know, but it looked cross about something, so I think I'll go down this other hallway instead. Oh, it's blocked. Guess I'll turn around and... where did you come from? Run, 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 I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess your chairs up. Oh, pissing blimey, there's jam coming out of the walls.
Okay, now only to make it back to the kitchen without seeing that thing again. I don't know if that's gonna happen. Oh my... just darkness out there.
This is the most atmospheric game I have ever played in my life. If you have any interest at all, any, in an experience that's gonna freaking terrify you, get Amnesia. Oh my god, get Amnesia. Frictional Games, it's on Steam, it's on sale right now, for God's sake. Oh my god. Unbelievable. I didn't know a game could just inspire such terror in you all the time. Even in the bits where nothing is happening. It's a freaking absolute, complete triumph of design and storytelling via ambience. And via sound and just crazy visual aspects. And it's hard to believe this was done by tiny indie studio. Really, unbelievable. Christ, I'm not going to sleep well tonight, I'll tell you that for a fact.
Things are a little different for SOMA's atmosphere in a lot of ways. They don't ramp it up like Amnesia, but they do bait you into a sense of safety and familiarity and then pull the carpet from under you. You are launched into the build-up, almost like tapping into your memory of Amnesia's atmosphere, and once the scan is complete, it's like the game is saying, welcome back. However, the theme and the tone are a little bit off compared to Amnesia. They aren't about you, about scaring you, about you reaching this level of fear. It's more about you playing a fly on the wall in this story as much as what you do affects the overall story. It doesn't in the way of what the questions ask. Everything that happens in the game has already been happening, and this is punctuated by the atmosphere, the sense that things just aren't right and haven't been for a long time.
Okay, so the question is about how did you go about with the live action trailers? And the reason for them is actually, it's pretty interesting, because doing PR for this game was a nightmare. Because I couldn't, like with the publisher, I couldn't explain to a media what it was about, and if I just talked about monsters, they would get the wrong impressions, and which a lot of people still did. So it was very, you know, what should I say? So these videos were like, okay, what sort of situations can we have that are slightly connected to the game, but still give the sort of sense that we want from the game without spoiling anything. It just came along from that, so it's just a PR thing. It was very successful in that.
SOMA's advertising campaign was filled with videos that tried to touch that very same sense of things just not being quite right. In Amnesia, of course, things aren't right, but it's more about the fact that you feel as though you're going to be killed at any moment, while in SOMA it feels like you don't even know that you're alive and that there's some horrifying realization around the corner. This creates an entirely different dynamic altogether, though there was still an obsession with immersion, of course, only this time, as I've said before, they changed it around a little.
Does the experience of, you know, playing a character mirrors the sort of the experience the protagonist has in the game? And this is a long subject, but we had a lot of, because there was a lot of debate on how we're going to do it, because I, up front, just wanted it to be like the player should be the character. That's how you're like inside it. But the thing that we noticed was that if the character didn't react to things in the game, the player didn't have a response either, because you had to have that response in order to play. Aha, you know, it's a human. I'm actually a human being. I'm not just a floating camera being here. But then again, if he said too much and like went counter to the player's beliefs or stuff like that, then that was too much, and the player was dragged out of the experience for that. So no, we didn't really have any sort of thematical mirroring, at least not conscious from my part. But there was a lot of thinking that how are we gonna present this? How is the player gonna be? Who is the player gonna be? There was a lot of thinking about that. What's gonna have the most impact?
So, Simon reacting to things gave the player permission to think of themselves as human, and of course helped enter them into the idea of approaching the questions the game was asking. The questions being the most important part to the game, it should stand to reason that whatever was sacrificed with Simon being able to talk was worth it. I did go over this quickly before, but the puzzles being matched to the environment in terms of aesthetics and difficulty was something that was chosen to aid in immersion once again. Dealing with the atmosphere in this game is a different beast to Amnesia. When Amnesia offered puzzles, they weren't often a simplistic Fisher-Price style game of matching certain things to other certain things, figuring out the message behind what you were seeing on screen. And not that that's a bad thing, but it wouldn't have worked for SOMA. Entering a futuristic research facility where you activate the power by putting square-shaped thing into square-shaped hole would have been extremely contrived. This is why when people complain about the puzzles, I think back to the 4 layers talk with Thomas.
Where if you have some control that says that if Mario is here, if his collision box or his center, I'm not sure what they go on actually, if his center of his body is down here, if it's even the top, then it's game over. Sort of, you have to restart the level, and that's a system here on a chasm. But in the game, the chasm has to have a special aesthetic. You know, it can't just be, you want to have it at a special place, you want it to look a special way, especially in later games like something like Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Galaxy, your chasms are going to look like chasms. So what you have here is, I'm just going to word here from film so everyone can like learn, if you haven't heard it yet, you can like, oh no, I need to learn a new tune. So so we have something mise en scene, which is a term from film, which is pretty good because it encompasses lightning and stuff like lightning costumes, whatever is in the scene, and obviously a chasm is in the scene. So when you build a game, you want to make sure that the mechanics come through as something. You know, if it's just the player needs to know why you're falling down the pit and stuff like that. So you go, oh, the player is going to know that they fall down a pit because it looks like a pit. Okay, that's awesome.
Yet they were still using a lot of techniques learned in Amnesia, like the mood lighting, the ambient sounds, the themes for different areas, and like I said, that sense that things are simply not right. And you want to know what that is. The sense that drives you to the main questions. And that's what Frictional wanted. People obviously still missed that though, or Frictional failed, your choice. Still a lot remained from the design, even including, as have been so wonderfully criticized already, the jump scares in the game. Thing is, how much is a jump scare cheap when it's done with lighting? Not bright lighting being shined in your face, just your typical fluorescent lighting turning off and then back on. The atmosphere is telling you to be on edge, so isn't your reaction your own? Like, for some reason when talking about shitty cheap jump scares, these reviewers don't immediately mention Five Nights at Freddy's, which is obviously the biggest offender. Could it be because they like the game? I don't know.
I know you said you don't want to just throw jump scares at people.
Yeah.
And I get that, because you can do it, you can overdo it.
Yeah.
But there's a fine art if you get it just right. So maybe, are there like maybe a couple in there?
Oh, I'm by no means saying the whole thing is a slow-paced exploration game. I mean, this is Frictional. It's not going to be that, and I'm not saying that you won't find, you know, shock, surprises, and really intense sections. But and you know, there'll be definitely short-term moments for intense fear. I'm damn sure about that. But the deeply unsettling stuff is a kind of slow burn.
Right.
What's going on here?
That's the stuff that keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
So, what is the value of what they're trying to achieve through the atmosphere they created?
But we're trying to add a slightly deeper layer to everything, which is, ideally, if we get this right, when you put the controller down and you walk away from the game, your brain will still be working. You'll still be going, oh, what was going on? How does that work? And hopefully the questions that we're asking are substantially disturbing, that it's a really disturbing feeling you're left behind with. I mean, to give you an idea of the kind of effect I'm talking about, if you were to look at something like, say, Inception or Blade Runner or those kind of things, and I'm not by any means saying it's all a dream, because it absolutely isn't all a dream, but you come away from Inception and there's this whole argument raging about, was that real? Was that not real? Right. And so that's not the question we're asking, because it's real, but we're trying to leave you in that questioning state as you come away with it, or in that disturbed state, throwing up all these ideas in your own head. And that's the kind of new element really for us that we're trying to put into this, and all of the little bits of sub-story you're seeing as you're going through the different environments, all of the little kind of fragments of narrative are all trying to play on that theme and build up that theme, and each decision that you take and each kind of choice that you take is kind of trying to bind that all up together and just get it going in your head, if that makes sense.
But what you're buying is a story that asks grotesque, bizarre, sometimes funny, but mostly disturbing cyberpunk questions in a neat little 8-hour, $30 horror adventure that wraps things up with a real mindfuck of an ending that makes perfect sense while raising more questions about our own selves than it does the questions of the story. And that's something that only the very best sci-fi can do, and there's definitely value to that.
Well, there you go. I would say that they were more than successful in their primary goal, and the atmosphere accompanying the gameplay was essentially guiding you there the entire time. It's like having something you expect to be the focus only being a stepping stone to something far more worrying. Something SOMA had over Amnesia was a higher budget and more experience, which led to imagery that was simply much more terrifying. Things that they would still opt to downplay, but when your previous game was about the main character coming to terms with ripping people in half and it has less flesh, you know that SOMA's gone somewhere horrifying.
Hit me. Daddy. Mommy. Hit me. Butterflies. Eat your breakfast, Daddy. Daddy.
The interesting thing in SOMA is that it's broken up very differently than Amnesia. The thing that you are given in order to relieve you from the pressure in Amnesia is light. The thing they give you in SOMA is life itself. Moments where you can talk to Catherine, or you can listen to logs from people filled with humanity. Moments where you don't have to face the grim reality of what the world is now. This to me is something really special, dictating atmosphere with our need to find people to be with, to communicate with. So yeah, without repeating everything I said in the Amnesia segment, each game has their purpose, and as per usual, the atmosphere is not something Frictional can fail, apparently. They abolish any sense of a missed opportunity with a masterclass of fine-tuning to drive you nuts. However, let's check out what some people have to say. Who's the reviewer? Oh, no.
And the game tries so hard to get you on edge with the tense, suffocating music, the loud noises and crashing sounds. It tries to assault all of your senses. It's screaming at you like a nervous dog. Hey, be scared. You should be scared right now. Are you scared? You scared? You scared yet? Instead of actually scaring you.
You know, I really do have to sit back in my chair sometimes and ponder the very existence of people like you. Why is it that you can take a finely tuned atmospheric system, one that is lost in essentially 98% of horror games, and just describe it as if it's something badly designed? That's all you did. You described it. Then compared it to a dog, which, I mean, the way you seem to be so randomly vicious in your analysis and constantly bark nonsense, I would say the comparison of a scared and confused dog falls more to you poignantly, but the real issue here is that your evidence to support your point is something of a very tense and scary moment. You have the server room, which is a faint red glow. The proxy slowly making its way around the room trying to sniff you out. The tearing of the screen to pound that sense of danger and inability to discern reality to 100%. The soundtrack of an abandoned station and the sounds of coughing and wheezing. The proxy just wailing around trying to find purpose. All of this to you is akin to a dog. I would honestly love to hear you say that you don't actually find any game scary, because this just doesn't make any sense anymore. You're just criticizing anything at this point. I'm going to level with you, Joseph. Before doing some major research for both Amnesia and SOMA, I held some opinions. But any that didn't follow the evidence or match the form of reality were dashed since they were useless to me. I'm happy to share other people's opinions, whether or not they fly in the face of evidence, because it's interesting to study. Not to fit some retarded fever dream where horror games need to be struck down and taught what's wrong with them by the mighty Joseph. What was it again? You're gonna make a video on what's wrong with horror games nowadays? I look forward to the first point being atmosphere and how we should get rid of it, and replace it with more real scares like death resetting the entire game and enemies that can't be escaped. Fucking cabbage.
Bye-bye! Oh, God! Oh my God. Oh. 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 Oh.
So in conclusion for Atmosphere, both rely on the concept of creating the sense of the world around you being completely against you, hiding information from you, constantly trying to catch you off guard, obscuring your vision to the threats. This results in both games achieving their goal, but which one was better?
SOMA is a lonely, emotionally draining experience, but not as chilling as previous titles from Frictional Games.
It's not as chilling? Well, what does that fucking mean? Good lord, why don't you just say that it wasn't as alarming or appalling or atrocious or daunting or dire or dismaying? How about it wasn't quite as dreadful or fearful, ghastly, grim, gruesome, hair-raising or harrowing or hideous or horrendous or horrible? Maybe you think the game could have been more horrid or horrifying, inconceivable, intimidating, macabre, menacing, morbid, ominous, petrifying, spooky, terrifying, traumatic, unnerving, or unspeakable? Any of those work for you? You fuck? If you don't explain what you mean by the words you're using, what the fuck was the point of using them? Your skill with analysis is about as effective as putting out a fire with a fucking shoe. Sorry, most of that was aimed at Joseph, I imagine. Where is he anyway?
It also feels like Frictional realized they weren't that visually intimidating either, and used that screen tearing effect to make it so you can't always get a great look at the things and have to fill parts of it with your imagination instead. Again, trying to convince you to be scared instead of being actually scary.
No. What? Just convince you to be scared. Using your imagination. You're unbelievable. You're criticizing them for having them use your imagination. What's next, Joseph? Gonna complain that they have you walk around in this game? Or maybe look at things? I just can't with you. Alright, you know what, Joseph? I'm gonna keep looking into your video, but you've lost the privilege of being in the philosophy segment, okay? You're not going anywhere near it. I'm not letting you touch it. It's too important to this analysis. You're not going in there at all. I'll see you after it, alright, faggot? Anyway, that's the end of the part, so thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time we're going to be looking into the philosophy in total. I'm rather excited, since that's what all of this has been building to in a way. And honestly, I hope you enjoyed that, and that you enjoyed this video. I would like to mention, though, that this is not quite the end of the video. I figured we'd end this on an interesting note. I decided one night that I would go out and record some visuals from the town I live in. I'm gonna mute the video itself and only add assets from SOMA and Amnesia to see if I can make it really creepy, to really just try and see how close I can come to actually manipulating some kind of atmosphere from the assets that they have in their game. So I hope you enjoy it, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Frick.